Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special one-on-one edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025, and I'm very pleased and honored to welcome as our guest today Sheriff Bill Brown. The sheriff is a graduate of USC, first elected in 2006, now in his fifth term. He's also a prominent leader in state and national law enforcement circles, currently serves as president of the Major County Sheriffs Association of America. Sheriff, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Jerry. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, we got to start, as all things do, with Donald Trump. He's been signing a series of orders and in the last couple of days trying to start his promised mass deportation of illegal immigration. And you and every sheriff in California are kind of caught in the middle on this between his demands that local law enforcement um, help federal immigration authorities and state law, the California Values Act, which really limits the amount of communication and cooperation you can do with ICE. Can you just explain where you are in the middle of those two forces?
Sure, and you put it well. We are, and I am in particular, a little bit in between a rock and a hard spot because of my MCSA presidency, and we're going into this new administration. Where we are just beginning to reach out and establish some working relationships. Pretty much all the faces have changed in Washington, D.C. In terms of currently a lot of acting positions, and there will be a lot of appointments that will be coming up as far as the heads of the law enforcement agencies. And then obviously the policy issues, like you mentioned, the executive orders that have come out. There's been just a flurry of things that have hit all at once. And so, but in many respects, I see it as sort of deja vu. The as you mentioned, the Values Act, which came from SB 54, the California law is very clear in terms of limiting California law enforcement officers' ability to work with ICE in immigration cases to enforce immigration law. And there are, as you know, some distinctions that allow us to advise of release dates in certain cases where a person has committed and been convicted of or charged with a very serious crime, and we can and do cooperate with ICE in those situations to the extent of just notifying them of the date that individual is going to be released. Other than that, we don't do any. We as local law enforcement agents do not do any local immigration enforcement. We don't work with ICE when they do that. It's solely a federal jurisdiction. And SB 54 was actually challenged by the U.S. Department of Justice and was taken to court. There was a district court ruling that essentially upheld almost all of the act, and it then went to an appellate court, which in our case is the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit upheld the district court's decision, and the Supreme Court in that case did not take the case. So the Ninth Circuit decision stood, and we basically have been operating under those parameters ever since. This is very similar. I suspect what will happen is that you'll see similar lawsuits, probably from both directions, that will attempt to probably land this back in a district court. Probably, my guess would be far away from the jurisdiction of the Ninth Circuit, and see what happens at the district court, and then the administration would look at and see that they could get two more bites at the apple, potentially an appellate decision that would either uphold a positive decision or the Supreme Court taking it if it was a negative decision and making a determination. And obviously the makeup of the Supreme Court is different now than it was in 2017, and there could be different outcomes. Regardless of what happens, our role as local law enforcement officers is to provide protection and service to everyone in our community. And that includes people who are undocumented. And I've been very clear ever since I ran for sheriff that, we do not engage in law enforcement that is enforcing federal immigration law, other than to the extent that I just said. And, we do that for a reason. It's a community policing principle that, we want people to call us if they're a victim of a crime. We want them to call us if they witness a crime in progress. And if we have people who are afraid that they're going to be deported, or they're going to be, their families are going to potentially be split apart, that doesn't bode well for victims coming forward, domestic violence or other victims, and also for people who witness crimes reporting them. So we have stayed out of that fray to the extent that we can. There's a misunderstanding in some circles about, ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is essentially the enforcement arm of the Customs and Border Protection Bureau in the United States. And there are several branches of ICE, and one of the branches are Homeland Security investigations. And they are criminal investigators, and they investigate crimes that occur in the United States or by foreign nationals outside of the United States. And they have tremendous expertise, and we do work with them. For example, if we have a pong boat incursion, and if we seize a boat with people and drugs and that sort of thing, we do work with them. But that's in a criminal investigation, not a immigration. And so I want to be very clear that we're not changing our stance on that at this point, and we're waiting to see what happens with court decisions.
So to the extent that someone would be in your custody in the jail, you would not communicate about their immigration status or any of their status unless they were in one of this category of extremely serious crimes, I assume murder, rape, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, actually, the law doesn't even allow us to ask a person their immigration status. So we basically, we can be told that, by federal authorities in a criminal investigation, perhaps. But if someone is arrested, comes in to our facilities, we ask them where they were born, and we can see that they're foreign born. But we cannot ask based on the parameters of SB 54. To ask what their immigration status is. And what we do is we book that person into custody. They are fingerprinted. Those fingerprints go into an electronic national database, and the federal government, the federal law enforcement agencies, get the results of those fingerprints, and that's how ICE determines if someone is someone who they want for either criminal charges or repeat, oftentimes, people who have been deported and returned multiple times, that sort of thing. They're able to find that if they have fingerprints in their database that match them. They will then issue us what is called a detainer request for us to not release someone on a certain charge. And that is has been deemed by the courts to be a request rather than an order that we have to follow. And under California's parameters, we now have this convoluted matrix of under SB 54 of who we can and who we cannot notify ICE that we are going to release. But we try to adhere to the letter of the law on this, and to have and it requires notification to the inmate if we receive a detainer. If there's a request for ICE to interview a person, they have to be told that it's a voluntary situation, and they can have an attorney and those sorts of things. All of that is part of SB 54 that we are that we have to adhere to, and that we do adhere to. What'll be interesting is to see if what changes are made. One of the first pieces of legislation that the president is likely to sign is the Lake and Riley Act, which just passed in both the Senate and the House, and that act specifically requires law enforcement. It requires federal authorities to take into custody persons who have committed crimes that wouldn't fit under the old
Or have
system.
been just been arrested for them,
Just
I
been
believe.
arrested, correct. And that's for burglary, for theft, and even including shoplifting, anything over $100 in value.
And those are not in the category of the sanctuary.
Some of them would be. Burglary would be, for instance, but yeah, certainly shoplifting wouldn't, and theft under $950 would not be at this point.
Yeah. And so just to as a practical matter, when you release an inmate, do you publish the names of the inmates, correct? On your website. Is that correct?
We have a system on our website called Who's in Custody, and it does have a list of who the present inmates are in jail. And we do have the chart. We don't show the charges. We show what their bail is, if there is a release date, if they're going to be released, if they're sentenced, in other words, what their release date is. And that was done not for immigration purposes. That was done really for victim purposes. So people who have been victimized can see if a suspect is still in custody, and they can check on that. Obviously, it is public, and it's specifically mentioned in SB 54 that immigration can't be given that information unless it is public information. So
Yeah.
we do have that, and no doubt they do use that. But Jerry, I think it's really important for everybody to understand that the last several years, ICE has we've notified them. We've gone through this whole process and boiled down their requests, and
I think 141 transfers last year.
No, nowhere near that. There were 141 requests for ICE to, and we deemed that, I think something like 57 or something. I can dig out and get you the exact numbers. Were acceptable under SB 54, but I think they only came and picked up 5 people. So
change.
ICE has been very, they struggle just as we do in terms of staffing and their resources, and they haven't been able to come, or for whatever reason haven't come and picked up most of the people actually that we have been notifying them of the releases of. But I suspect that might change, and I suspect that we'll see some increases there perhaps. But it's all a wait and see at this point. There's a lot of unknown factors that are going to be there, and no doubt, this will end up in the courts and litigation, and
let me ask you
what
this:
we'll ultimately have to adhere to.
you've spent your whole career in law enforcement, and the Trump's underlying premise on this whole deportation thing is that there are mass numbers of violent criminals who are undocumented immigrants who are walking our streets. I mean, is that an accurate portrayal or not, based on the communities that you deal with?
Well, I wouldn't say that in our case, for example, in our county, that it's happened on a mass basis, but it hasn't, but it has happened. Let's just put it that way. As you will recall, we had an instance a number of years ago up in Santa Maria where a woman who was a veteran, Air Force veteran, who was a civilian employee of the government and worked on Vandenberg at then Air Force Base, who was attacked and sexually assaulted and murdered by 2 people, one of whom was an undocumented immigrant who had come in, who had been arrested for pretty serious charges, but the charges were reduced, and they were reduced to the point where we couldn't notify ICE under SB 54, and that person was released. That person then got arrested again on drug charges and a weapons offense, neither of which qualified again for the notification, and was released, and then ended up murdering this woman in Santa Maria. So, it was a very tragic story, a very tragic situation. And so the argument that's made, and, it's got some validity to it, in Laken Riley's case. You had a 22-year-old nursing student who was out for a jog and was attacked by a Venezuelan uh, person who was here and who had previous encounters with law enforcement, and he ended up killing her and murdering her, and that was the basis of the push to get an act that said that, to take the level down, not just from the most heinous crimes that had previously been committed, but any serious crime that's been committed, or even in the case of shoplifting, which is what this individual I think had done on the second go around. And it got majority support, and I think if you polled most people, they would say that they want to see those types of crimes prevented from happening. But it's not. I wouldn't say that it's a mass amount. The vast majority of people who do come in to this country illegally, they do so because they want a better life for themselves and their families. And what I've often said, Jerry, is that for 30 or 40 years, 50 years now, maybe, we have been, as a nation, kind of just looking at all of this with a wink and a nod, and we knew what was going on, and we allowed it to happen. And the people who are here have become so integrated into our economy and into our community that if there was a wholesale deportation of millions and millions of people, I don't know how you would backfill a lot of those positions. It would be very, very challenging. And there are it's difficult because there are some very, very poignant stories that that come out on all of this, and it's on both sides. So it's like everything else in life. You have to try to find middle ground that allows you to protect the community, at the same time to observe that the vast majority of people, as you allude to, are not a threat, and in fact are an asset in many respects.
Oh, are you hearing anything, or what are you hearing, among Latino communities in and around the county, in terms of, I read stories nationally about, how fearful people are, that there's paranoia, panic, whatever you want to call it. What's your experience of that?
Well, the fear quotient has definitely ratcheted up. There's no question about that. And I've heard from representatives of the Hispanic community that there's a lot of rumor that ICE was seen and vehicles were seen and everything else, and most of it untrue. That there was raids and things that were happening and going on. It's not to say that things won't happen, but the reality is ICE has said, and I believe it will be, that their priority is going to be criminal aliens, people who have come into the country illegally and either have committed crimes previously in other countries, or have committed crimes here and have been convicted of them. And I think they'll be the first target to go after. I think what's going to happen, though, is you will see some collateral arrests as well. They'll be targeting one person. They come into a location, and that person is in the company of 5 other people who are all undocumented, maybe not criminal in nature, but they're here illegally, and they may have been deported before and come back or whatever. Those people, I think, are going to be arrested also and taken in by ICE in those cases. So there will no doubt be some more people of that definition that are going to be arrested and than have been in the last few years.
All right, and
again, arrested by ICE, not by local law enforcement.
Right. Just finally on this, I mean, among the steps that Trump's taken so far, proposing to end birthright citizenship, sending troops to the border, ending prohibitions on arrests in schools and churches and hospitals, aren't those protected spaces under the state law?
Certainly the schools and the churches are. And, there's there have been they've always been sort of considered off limits, but more for a policy decision rather than a legal decision on the part of the federal government. So that'll be a policy change, I suspect, and
Does
won't.
does that put you in any kind of bind, or not really?
Not really, because we're not going to be accompanying ICE and making those arrests and involved in that situation. So
You might be called to put out a
but
riot when it happens, though.
yeah, and obviously if there's a confrontation or if there's a something that happens and we get called, I mean that may be there as well. But we're not going to be at the point of the incident in any event.
And to what extent, as leader of the National Sheriff's Association, do you speak out, or are you called upon to speak out about any of this?
Well, I mean, certainly we'll have some discussions with the administration when we establish that relationship. Again, as I say, I've been the president for 2 years, a 2 year term. I've been president for 1 year already. I'm in the middle of my 2 year term, and much of my last year, there were several trips back to Washington, D.C., where I was basically in meet and greets and getting to know people in the various law enforcement agencies of the federal government. Now all of that's changed, and now we have to sort of do all that again and get to know who's going to be in there. And most of those agencies don't have permanent appointees in them yet. They have people who are temporarily there now, so there's not a lot of channels at this point. I've never met President Trump. I've never sat down with any of his closest advisors or his members of his cabinet or anything like that. But certainly I will do that, and if we get the opportunity, and I'll be candid with him. And I think even President Trump has said in the past that he has some understanding about there are certain things that have to be fixed. The DACA was the one that comes to mind, for example, where we have people who've come into this country as babies or children, brought in by their parents who came in illegally, but the child has now grown up, and for 25 years has grown up in America, and their whole culture, their whole to talk about having them deported back to the country of their birth would be very challenging. I mean, that person doesn't have any contacts, oftentimes doesn't even speak the language, perhaps of that country. So I think the president has particularly commented about that. And my hope is that this will all become, once the flurry of initial change and the so-called shock and awe that has been put together by the administration, when that calms down, I'm really hopeful that both parties will be able to sit down and really try and hammer out some really comprehensive immigration reform that is desperately needed and has been for many, many years. And really, it's a shame on both parties that this has been used as such a political cudgel that we don't have the kind of change that we need, and we really need to have a system that and I believe our borders need to be secure. I believe that we cannot. I think the last few years have been terrible in terms of the numbers of people who've come in, and the lack of accountability and the lack of a real handle on who's come into the country. And I've been to the border myself and witnessed, people coming over. And it was predominantly Mexican citizens that would come into the country. And the day that I was down there, the people that were coming across in groups were from Uzbekistan and Romania and Afghanistan and Russia and a large number of them from China. And so, we are getting people from all across the world who came in under the lax entry policies that we had on the last administration. So they both had problems, and they're both issues that both parties have had problems in the past. And I think hopefully this could be a catalyst to bring them together and finally get some immigration reform done.
Well, it's only 1,397 more days till the end of the first of the next Trump administration. So we'll see. Hey, let me ask you,
Let me just say one thing to you on
yeah,
that. When I ran for sheriff, I met before I did so. I met with then District Attorney Tom Sneddon, and we had lunch, and he talked to me about it. He gave me several axioms which have really proven to be very true. The first one was your friends will not always be your supporters, and your supporters will not always be your friends. And so, that I found that to be true. But the other axiom that he gave me, and it's always proven true, is that Bill, he said, it's never as good or as bad as you think it's going to be. So let's hope that everything holds true on that.
you've made my entire day. I want you to know that. What was your reaction to the pardoning of the 1,500 or so January 6th protesters, many of whom beat cops? That was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that was something that was pretty universally that law enforcement officers had problems with and were not happy about. Conversely, I was not happy about a lot of the pardons that came out from the Biden administration as well. And so, I mean, it was, again, they're both. It's sad to see you know, um, the pardon process used in the way that it was, I think, on both sides.
Let me ask you a couple of local questions, if I could. You've been very involved in the fentanyl crisis with the schools and elsewhere. And then last spring, I know at the supervisors, you said you need to do something rather famously. And I think you would ask for a five-person narcotics investigative team. Where does that all stand? And we had what 226 overdose deaths the year before. Is it getting any better?
Um, it is getting better. And let me just sort of recap where we've been. Um, the uh, so I did make that plea to the board of supervisors to get our narcotics team back. Let me just preface it by saying that when I became sheriff in 2007, we had two narcotic teams in the sheriff's office, two 5-person teams, one in the North County and one in the South County. We also had a regional narcotics team called SaberNet, which was run by a state Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement supervisor, and all of the law enforcement jurisdictions in the county provided a single person to work on that team. So we had a regional multi-agency team as well. And then all of the police departments, the larger ones, Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, Lompoc, all had either teams or people dedicated to narcotic enforcement. And over the years, in the wake of the Great Recession, we saw the state get out of the narcotic enforcement business. They shut the Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement down. They pulled that person. So we didn't, and even before that happened, the cities were pulling their people back because of staffing shortages that were occurring and their need to get basic patrol functions handled. And so we ended up in a situation not long ago where we had and in the wake of the Great Recession, we lost one of those teams in our organization. We ended up just having 5 people that were in a county of 450,000 people that were dedicated full time to narcotic enforcement. We were the only game in town. The police departments, one by one, had all pulled their people back and from their narcotics units because of staffing shortages and priorities. And so we were the only ones that were there for the entire county. And so my proposal was, please give us another 5 positions so that we can stand up a second team. And the board, for whatever reasons, primarily the perception of financial inability, they did not provide that. So we went back to the drawing board. And when I looked at the numbers of total drug overdose deaths and the 236 or 7 number that you gave, I think that was the combined number for 2023 and 2022. And then in 2021 and 2022. In 2023, we had 157. So let me just give you the progression. 2021, we had 139 total drug deaths in our county. 2022, we had 148. 2023, we had 157. So we were just on a climb out. We were seeing this increase again and again and again.
That was fentanyl, correct?
And in 2020, yeah, fentanyl had really upped the ante in this. And then in 2023, when I made the pitch for that position, or in 2024, in the beginning, in our budget year, made the pitch for that second narcotics team and didn't get it. We went to the drawing board and we just said, look, we have to do something. And so we took 3 positions, a sergeant and 2 other deputy positions from different locations in the organization, and we added them to the mix in our narcotic enforcement resources. We created 2 teams out of that combination of people, 2 4-person teams, one in the north, one in the south. That North County team went active in July of last year, and they were just supremely successful. They just did an amazing job. So much so that I believe they were significantly responsible for a large amount of the reduction in deaths that occurred. And I'll give you this, and this is brand new information that we'll be putting out in a press release here very soon. We went from 139, 148, 157. Last year, 2024, we had 90 deaths.
Wow.
So we had a decrease of 42.68%. And fentanyl deaths went from, in those same years, 2021, we had 76 of those 139 were fentanyl. 116 of the 148 in 2022 were fentanyl. 110 of 157 total, 110 of those were fentanyl in 2023. And we went in 2024, of that total of 90, only 54 were fentanyl related. So we saw a decrease by about 50% in
and that's from getting it off the market
in overdose deaths. And so I won't attribute it solely to that because, as you know, we started Project Opioid and we joined forces with a variety of different organizations and leaders from throughout the county to approach the fentanyl problem in a multifaceted way through primary prevention and education, as you mentioned, in the schools and in the community. And I think we've been very successful at that, unless you've been living under a rock. And the media has been very good about helping us get the message out. Unless you've been hiding somewhere, most people know, including drug users, that fentanyl is potentially a very lethal drug, and one dose can kill you. We also saw a ramping up of treatment services from our partners at behavioral wellness and in the private sector, offering community-based treatment. And we in the jail stepped up with a very robust medication-assisted treatment program in our jails. And I'm happy to say that we currently have over 200 of our 750 or so inmates on any given day. Over 200 of them are enrolled in a medication-assisted treatment program and are receiving medications which assist them in conquering their addictions and weaning them off of opioids and also of alcohol. And then in addition to that, we had harm reduction. We had a massive distribution effort on Narcan to get Narcan out into the community. I've got Narcan in my pocket right now. We've distributed it and encouraged people to carry it, have it in their cars, have it on their person available. Families of drug users themselves have come in and obtained it. And I think that's been also instrumental in helping us. But the real proof was the look in the last year of the since we did the team. If you look at the statistics, last year we were averaging roughly 10 people a month that were dying in the first 6 months of the year. In the last 6 months of the year, we averaged 5 people dying every month. And we were able to cut that number, as I said, down to 90. And I really believe that the enhanced enforcement has made a huge difference. We took, just to give you an idea, our single team in the first 6 months of the, let's see if I can find this for you for the exact numbers, but single team that took off the drugs that they did, they took, and we broke this down into individual doses, but from January to June of 2024, one narcotics team seized 0.8 pounds of fentanyl and 350 M30 pills for a total of 4,041 doses, individual doses of fentanyl. In the second half of that year, July to December, the teams they got 4.53 pounds of fentanyl. That alone was 20,612 doses of fentanyl. And M30 pills, they seized 2,581 for a total number of doses removed from the streets of 23,193, any one of which could have been fatal. So I just think it was a great testament to the work that they have done. I'm very proud of what they've done.
That's all really good news.
But yeah, the bottom line is that number has been driven down. It's still acceptably high, 90 overdose deaths. When I first became sheriff, we would average maybe somewhere in between in the 45 to 55 range, maybe every year. And we've seen it go up. So we're still focused on trying to crack down on that 90 total.
All right. Sheriff, you've been so generous with your time, but I do have to ask you a couple other things real quick.
Sure.
In terms of health care at the jails, particularly mental health care, there's been grand jury reports, other criticisms. It seems like there's two tracks. One is the amount of money and the contract compliance with this outfit, WellPath, and then the other is sort of the level of mental health services at the jail. Can you just say a word about that?
Sure. As you say, we've contracted with WellPath, and as you know, recently we went to the board and requested that we enter into negotiations with them to continue for them to provide the service. WellPath is not perfect, but neither are we, neither is anybody. And by and large, WellPath has provided very good medical and mental health care to the inmates in the Santa Barbara County Jail. And we believe that they are in the best position to continue doing that because they know our facility. Their staff have really become integrated with ours in terms of being a team. They have to work together. Inmates, particularly in our South County Jail, have to be seen and moved, I guess, to the medical area rather than vice versa. We have different layouts at the Northern Branch Jail than we do at the Southern Branch Jail. And so if we're short-staffed, it makes a negative impact on WellPath as well. WellPath has been short-staffed in certain cases. During the pandemic and in the post-pandemic days, it was very difficult for them to hire, and remains difficult for them and for all healthcare entities to hire people. Nurses are in great shortage. There's a lot of traveling nurses that are here in our county and working in the hospitals, and medical people of all occupations are difficult to find and hire right now. So I think there's been a lot of criticism about WellPath. There have been focuses on some lawsuits outside our community, and matter of fact, most of them outside of California, that WellPath has been involved in, but they are the largest healthcare provider in
Is it
correctional
out for bid?
settings.
Is the contract out for bid or
So
the
no, we're going to enter into negotiations. Basically, the board did express some concerns. We talked about it, and we had requested a 5-year contract. WellPath had said that they'd be willing to look at a 3-year contract with a couple of year extensions that could be put on. And so that looks like the route that we will probably go in. And our hope is that we'll have a contract that will be agreed upon, and we'll be back to the board in the spring. And also, we are already seeing improvements because we have contracted with more staff from WellPath than what we had. And as I said at the board meeting, this is always a challenge because it's always a question of balancing the quality of care and the amount of people that you have to provide it with the amount of money that you have. And it's a very expensive proposition to provide healthcare in a jail setting.
and also we have this endless debate about how many beds we need in the jail, and there's certainly a practical piece of it, but there's also a philosophical piece of it, I think, among the board. Now, you've proposed 2 new pods, is this correct, at the northern branch jail?
Correct.
Is there controversy about that? Is there any question that that's going to happen?
The decision hasn't been made yet. That's our recommendation, and it would, in my estimation, be the most pragmatic approach for the county to take, bearing in mind our current jail population, the potential for that population to increase somewhat in the future as a result of population growth and also changes in the law, Prop 36, which passed.
Proposition 36.
Right. So I suspect we may see some increase in the short term. I don't think it'll be huge, but I think there will be some. And then the other factor is that providing those 2 pods would only put us at just under 1,000 rated beds in the jail system. We have almost 1,200 right now, 1,157 or something, but many of those are unrated beds. They're beds that don't meet the current standards of construction, and what we have to have is we can't have just a 1 bed for 1 inmate ratio. We're like a hospital. You never want to be full. You need to have about a 15% vacancy factor because we classify inmates. We can't put certain types of inmates together. We can't put men and women together. We can't put gang members from rival gangs together. We can't put vulnerable victims in with predatory inmates. We have a system. We have a whole section of people in our classification system which categorizes what type of housing an inmate should be put in. And in order to do that properly, we have to have the industry standard is about a 15% vacancy factor. So in essence, we need 1,000 beds for 850 people in the jail. And we're currently at right around 750 people. And I think the predictions have been, the study that was done, the Wilson study predicted we need 850 as the likely population that we'll be seeing in a few years due to those factors that I mentioned before, growth and changes in the law.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. One last question. A lot of talk about housing by everyone. How big a factor is housing in the recruiting and retention issues that you have on the department? And say a word, if you would, about what those are.
It's a huge factor. The reality is particularly our South County is incredibly expensive to begin with, to purchase property or rent property. And the salaries that we pay are not really conducive to a sheriff's deputy being able to afford to buy a house in the South County. The North County is more affordable, but it's actually going up in price also, which is concerning. But particularly South County, and a lot of our people that we hire live in Ventura County, where it's cheaper to live. And so they commute back and forth, and we have seen a number of people that end up after, being stuck in traffic with the roads torn up and everything, with the highways torn up, and saying, well, maybe I should look at something here closer to home. So it's very difficult. And my hope is that maybe we'll see some housing. When I first ran, I had the notion to really work hard to see if we could come up with some subsidized housing for not only law enforcement, but fire and nursing and teaching personnel. People breaking into those professions it's always a struggle in this community. So it's not unique to law enforcement. And my idea was that we could develop, maybe in partnership with developers, some little complexes, apartment complexes that would have a mixture of those employees, and they could be there for a certain number of years and save for a down payment on a house, and maybe get some romances going there, and have some dual income marriages, and then they could afford to buy a house and move out. So I
Well,
actually had
talk about social engineering.
yeah, just trying everything at this point. But and have had some discussions with the school district and with others about maybe getting them included. I think that would be a creative way to look at maybe trying to address this issue in the longer term, because it's gonna do nothing but get worse. As you mentioned as well in our local media, as we've seen a lot of interest in people from the Palisades that have lost homes. I wouldn't be surprised that a lot of them end up moving up here to our community. So we need to do something about affordable housing.
Is that the number one problem with your retention? And
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a variety of things. I think there's just some generational changes. A lot of our people coming in now are not coming in as I did or as we did in the old days with I'm going to have a career in law enforcement, I want to have a career in journalism. A lot of people are coming in like, I'll try that for a while and do that, but they look at it almost more like it's military service. I'll do 5 years and then I'm going to go try something else, or I'm going to do something else. There's a greater emphasis on family, I think, and a lot of times their family moves, they move, out of state to be close to them, and there's just we've really tried to analyze it, and there's no one set thing that is occurring. It's just a across the board. I mean, we have to be competitive. We have to be obviously in the market with our neighbors, but there's more to it than that. And as great as Santa Barbara is, we can't just pay our people in scenery. As a San Diego mayor once said, we have to be practical and realistic.
All right. Well, Sheriff Bill Brown, you heard it here. Things are never as bad or as good as they look. So we really appreciate you taking
No, never as good or as bad as you think they're going to be.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, and good luck.
My pleasure, Jerry. Thank you for having me on.